Well, welcome everyone. I'm sure some more people will pop in as this moves forward. I'm Hunt Priest, and I'm really honored to be facilitating this conversation with three really good friends and colleagues. That all of us were part of the Johns Hopkins NYU Religious Professional Study with psilocybin. My session was 10 years ago, actually, at the end of this week, so on Thursday. So it's been, and then it was a staggered thing. So all of us came in at different times at two different sites, at Hopkins in Baltimore and then at NYU. And one of the hopes of this project, which is it's hosted and with a lot of support from Shefa, a lot of technical support and organizing support from Shefa, one of the Jewish psychedelic organizations, from Rouhani, which is a Muslim-focused psychedelic organization, and then Ligare, which is the organization I started 5 years ago to begin a Christian, or not to begin, but to facilitate and hold a Christian conversation around the healing and spiritual benefits of psychedelics, all of us working in our own context. And all three organizations coming out of the three founders' experience in the study and in our different communities and all the different ways that Muslims and Jews and Christians think about spirituality and live spirituality particularities, but also, of course, common themes that come up, which we'll certainly touch on in the course of our discussion today. I certainly again want to thank Chef and especially Chloe Jacobs, who's doing our tech support. She's on staff at Chef, and Rabbi Zach Kamenetz, who's doing such an amazing job convening these conversations in the Jewish community. So thank you, and thank you all for coming and for your interest in this. It promises to be a really enlightening conversation. One of the challenges we've had as participants is that often our stories have been told by other people. And one of the hopes and the plans for this series is that we actually get to tell our stories, which seems like a much more efficacious and ethical way to do that. So I'm honored to be convening it. My story's out there so much because of I popped my head up early like Zach did and started these organizations. So it's not hard to find me telling my stories about the intersection of psychedelics in my own life and ministry. So I'll leave that bulk of that story for you to find otherwise, and we'll share that in an email that'll go out tomorrow with the recording of this event. But I was in the study 10 years ago, and 5 years ago I started an organization at the intersection of Christianity, psychedelics, healing, and spirituality, and it's been a joy and a highlight of my ministry. I was when I was in the study, I was the priest at an Episcopal church in the Seattle area on Mercer Island, and then that summer I moved to Savannah, where I am now, to serve a church here. And then 5 years ago, resigned that position to start Ligare. And I've in the last 5 years, met some of the most amazing, gifted, committed people, hundreds of people actually, and but my heart is with those of us. My biggest part of my heart's with those of us in the study, all of us at the time serving congregations or communities or doing work at the intersection of religion, spirituality, and psychedelics. And in the course of that time, many of us have changed positions. We've expanded our ministry. We've taken on creative projects and vocational related projects. And from Julie, Ruben, and Jeff, we'll certainly hear a lot of that today. We'll have a little, after they make a short talk about their experience and their lives, we'll have a little roundtable discussion, and we'll certainly open it up to you all to ask questions, comments, that sort of thing, sort of standard Zoom conferences. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to invite my friend Julie Danan, who's a rabbi in Delaware now. She wasn't there when she started, but and let Julie tell her part of her story, the highlights of her story, and then we'll move on down around the circle. Good morning, Julie.
Thank you, Hunt.
You're welcome.
And I just want to honor the fact that several of my Jewish Renewal colleagues are here and teachers, and thank you for being here. Thanks to all who came here today. I think the two sessions that I did in the summer of 2016 at Johns Hopkins were very expansive and probably the most powerful mystical experiences of my life. But they were more than the sessions. They were about the preparation that I did, which I can't go into detail, there's not time, but the kind of the afterglow and the afterflow and the changes and a new discovery and gift in my life that I'll share. But really, in the moment that we're in right now in our country and in our world, it's not enough to just talk about what happened. I will tell you a little bit about that, but I wanted to share some things from my experiences that I hope would strengthen us and give us, something to hold on to in this moment. So about me, I grew up in Texas and San Antonio in the Hill Country, where I had my first mystical experience at age 12. And I especially had more personal experiences after, at age 36, I joined the Aleph Rabbinic program, which is the Jewish Renewal program, which is now called AOP, Aleph Ordination Programs. Our founder of our movement and a spiritual father to me is Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, known as Reb Zalman, who had bridged the world of European Jewry pre-Holocaust, and then coming to America, where he was a Lubavitcher Chassid. I don't have time to define all the terms, but he was a very traditional Jew. But he took LSD with Timothy Leary and others, and that opened his mind and outlook, although I think he would have done it one way or the other. And he became the founder of a movement that's revitalized and renewed Jewish spirituality, as well as becoming really a great interfaith and world figure. And he's died about 12 years ago, I think. So anyway, I was in this movement where psychedelics were seen as a positive. And in fact, many of my colleagues wanted to be in the study, but they couldn't be in it because they were not naive to psychedelics. But it's not just that. We learned so much about Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, Chassidut, the renewal of Jewish mysticism about 300 years ago. And we had then the language and the tools in which to contain and describe and hold our experiences, which not everybody has if they just do this. So that's important. And I also, besides doing this program, which I completed in the 2000, I received ordination. But in 2009, I completed a Ph.D. in Hebrew Studies from the University of Texas at Austin, although I was living in Northern California then. And my dissertation was on Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, in rabbinic literature, where she is feminine and she is aligned with the Shekhinah, the divine feminine, the Jewish goddess, the feminine face of God, whatever you'd like to call her. So here's a short version of my experiences. Just keep an eye on the time, but I wrote back then, the psilocybin as an entheogen unlocked my consciousness. So I went from ordinary consciousness that we call mochin de katnut, the little mind kind of in the language of Kabbalah, to a transpersonal expanded consciousness, mochin de gadlut, great, bigger consciousness. And what's important to me is the moments and the lessons that I learned. My experience moved from some chaos and discomfort. And I was very apprehensive about being this, by the way. I had not tried anything like this before. And then it went to a sense of vastness and awe, and what the Kabbalah calls Ein Sof, the boundless reality, the endless divinity, and imagery that I was surprised was so far from my own Jewish experience and culture. Things I couldn't believe could be in my brain cells, and also beyond the human world. And as the day continued, I felt the arc bringing me back towards earth. That's how I felt, that the vessels of my own tradition and my own heritage reasserted themselves to bring me the deepest spiritual teachings in a lived and existential form. I felt like I was returning to planet Earth and to my own blessed life with an overwhelming gratitude for the particulars of my own life. And then in the next few days, I went on to a dazzling sense of how interconnected everything is, how each person and every creature is a manifestation of the one divinity to be honored and treasured. I went from what Martin Buber called the I-it, the objectification of others, to which, again, I wouldn't say I was a cold person objectifying people, but to really see the I, thou, the you in others. And the doors of my perception were then open to the amazing wonder of creation's beauty. The soul of meaningful experiences and meetings opened up in my life. And then the second session, I was apprehensive, though, despite how beautiful that was. It was also, overwhelming. And I was reluctant, but I did it. I felt an obligation to do it. And it was even more expansive and powerful as I went on a quest of questions. I spoke in the voice of the Shekhinah. Just as a little tiny snippet off that divine hologram, not to say I'm a drop of water in that divine ocean, the divine feminine, and I emerged with this flowing waterfall of inspiration and creative flow, and in the next couple of years, a new gift of nature photography. So it's going to ask for Chloe to just show briefly on the screen a little bit of what I'm talking about. Those are some of the animals, and scroll up a little bit and you can see some of the up to the top, yes. And then that's kind of a carousel. You can show some of just some of these. And I definitely attribute this new holy hobby and I call it my spiritual practice, and sharing the wonders of and awe of nature and creation, that it began with having a new perception and seeing the world a different way. And then, of course, there was a lot of technical things to learn, but really, that was the spiritual lesson. Okay, we could stop the share there. Thank you. You'll get a link if you want to see more. Anyway, but with all of that beauty and wonder, and how many minutes am I into this? About halfway in. Nope. Okay. In my own tradition, and I'm sure many others, we don't seek mystical experience for its own sake, but we talk in our movement a lot about this. You're going up the mountain like Moses, but you have to bring it down. Otherwise, the people are just going to be worshiping the golden calf down there. We have to bring it down. That's the real challenge. And we need so much tikkun olam right now. That is the repairing and healing of the world. And just, of course, the events in Minneapolis are very, very disturbing. And I have my daughter and her family live there. And in fact, she's a physician at that VA hospital where Alex Preddy worked. And she shared with us a tribute that was there in the hospital by all the staff to him. So what's the use then of psychedelic or expanded consciousness faced with the injustices of the world and the assaults on the planet? So in my own second session, first I was there, I was a little befuddled, and I was going, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? Wait, what am I doing here? The question got bigger and bigger. It wasn't a Zen question, kind of, what is it, if I could say, but it was a Jewish question. What am I doing here? What am I, the big I, doing here right now as me? And what is my tradition doing here? What is the point of all of this? And so I wanted to focus briefly on one thing, which is the role of face. So if you want to turn on your camera and I see your face, that's up to you. But as I was preparing for my session, I went to the Aleph Kala, this big Jewish renewal gathering in Fort Collins, and Rabbi Naomi Steinberg, famous for her work as the Redwood rabbis, sharing some of the ancient redwoods, told us a story of a chassid, a Jewish devotee who lost his dear departed Rebbe, his teacher, and he went to bed praying to see the Rebbe's face, and then in the morning, everybody's face looked like the Rebbe's face. Eventually, he could see their own faces, but it was like the message was that God told Moses, no one can see my face and live, but we see the eternal thou in one another's faces. And during my first session, I think probably the most profound experience I had was that I felt myself like the ancient Jewish mystics, the Hechalot mystics that would search in all the palaces of heaven for the divine. And they were told, don't get distracted by the scenery and all the roller skating through the Louvre, right? But so I was calling out, I want you, I want only you, only you. And then in a miraculous moment, I realized that I'm saying you's looking for me. I am the you. And it was all turned around, and I was transformed. Like Meister Eckhart said, the eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me. And again, not to say that I had a God complex, but the sense that this divinity is within us, within our pulse, within our breath. This is all teachings from a Jewish renewal too, the late Rabbi Arthur Waskow. The very name of God is in our breath. And after the sessions, I saw people differently. Coming back from a plane trip actually to Minnesota, I remember landing in New York, where I lived then, and there was a plane of weary travelers of all different different kinds of people, and I looked at everybody like, you're all so beautiful. I remember walking down in New York City, and I had a very strange experience that in New York City, there's all the vast diversity of humanity, and I felt my own face changing, like, I'm this person, I'm that person. I could be any of these people. Why me? That's a question I asked, why me? Why is the divine playing me? And that's a role that I need to play. But really, as the Talmud says, that an earthly king puts their stamp on every coin and they're all the same, but the divine sovereign of all sovereigns puts that divine stamp on every human being, and yet everyone is different and yet has that divine image. So right now in our world, if we could just see the humanity, the divinity in each creature, in each person, and that is when I do the nature photography, definitely relating to the divinity in every creature. And I wonder again, and I don't know if she's telling me I'm going over, I'm about to wrap up. Is that okay? Hunt, am I okay with time? Minute? Okay. I did ponder some questions of, I'm looking at my hair now. What is evil then in this world of divine unity if it's not a duality? And I had this sense that those who do, the perpetrators and people that are doing, bad, also want that greatness of being the divine, just like I was seeking it, that inner divinity, but as the Kabbalah calls it, Sitra Achra, the other side of this impulse to be great, to realize their divine potential is there, but it's the other side because it's lacking humility, it's lacking humanity. And they think that they mistake greater to mean greater than others, forcing others to believe that their part of this multifaceted truth is the whole. And that's where it all starts. So I felt if we can only use our social immune system to cure this, all of these, these social malignancies in nonviolent ways with the power of community. My teacher, in my last paragraph here, is my teacher, Rabbi Jeff Vidt, who was the founder of Elat Chaim, this incredible retreat center that's no longer around, but I went to, he has a meditation that I put on my website, my other website, Wellsprings of Wisdom, in which Moses, it's said that Moses wanted to see God's face, and God said, you can't see my face and live, you can only see my back. But then at the end of the Torah, it says Moses saw God face to face, so how is that possible? Amazing. The most amazing meditation on this. It's like, put yourself in Moses' place. You're on the mountaintop and you're in the cleft of the rock. And it's not that you see God face to face. It's like you step into God from the back and you see the world through God's face, with God's eyes. Now you're beholding humanity and the world and creation like that. How would we act differently then? I think that's the purpose of why we're doing this and what we're doing here, to expand our hearts and expand our minds, to create more community. And you don't have to get it through psychedelics, but we need the inner life that is so neglected in our world today, so that we can develop that greater sense of compassion and connection and, bring those gifts down to earth from the mountain. So that's what I want to say. Which was like 15 minutes. I don't know. Sorry.
That's okay. Oh my God, Julie, thank you. I mean, in good rabbinical form, what a teacher and a teaching time that was. Thank you. Just, yeah, the Jew, you have such beautiful access to the language of Jewish mysticism that it just came through so clearly. As you were telling the story about being in New York, I couldn't help but remember the story of Thomas Merton and the mid-century Catholic Christian mystic who talked about his epiphany on the street in downtown Louisville, Kentucky, when he looked around and saw everyone's face shining like the light and just saw this deep interconnectedness. So yeah, you're muted, Julie.
Please share that with me, Hunt.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, it's among things that transcend traditions, and maybe we'll talk about this in a minute. But what we can learn, you've you've intimated,
Yeah.
you talked about what we can learn from each other, not to the commonalities are there, but also the differences and where we can learn from each other about the nature of
Yeah.
God. So one of the
Okay.
beauties of inner spiritual and interfaith work. Oh, wow. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Jeff, I'm not sure I'd want to follow Julie, but you're up next. And
Well,
each of us have taken these experiences and put them into work in different ways. And Jeff will talk about how this has impacted his work and his own life. So, Jeff, thank you for being here.
and thank you, Hunt, and thank you, Shefa, and everyone that's contributed here. Thank you, Julie. I think there's been a lot of resonance in much of the words that you say with some of my own intentions of coming here. My name is Jeff. I'm a spiritual health practitioner at a hospital here on the unceded lands and territories of the Anishinaabe and Algonquin peoples, also known as Ottawa. So I'm calling in from Canada, and I want to give a sense of uh, shared concern and shared hope. A lot of us up here are thinking of you folks and sending meditations to you, and in bewilderment, but also inspired to help in some way. So if anyone ever wants to come up to Canada, you have a welcome home up here. In any case, but I'm delighted to speak to you, and I'm recognizing some of my intentions in speaking with you today are to uh, recognize with hope that this is one story out of many. I don't want to sort of feel as though I'm special just because I took part in some random study a few years ago, but it's a part of my story, and I recognize that every single person on this call has their own that is speaking to them and growing with them and has something to teach us. And so I'm honored to be able to share with you, and it's in hope of relationship that we continue this conversation. As Hunt was mentioning, I participated in this study as well. My context, I grew up in a pretty conservative Christian household in the middle of Indiana, and was taught from a very young age that drugs are bad, all kinds of drugs, and that we harbored an interest in mystical experiences, but I was also taught very much that they don't happen anymore, and that the real truth comes from Scripture and comes from what is taught from the pulpit. And in fact, if you hear of mystical experiences, you should have a fair degree of suspicion that there's probably something else at work other than the spiritual. So I had this tension between what Scripture said happened in mystical experiences and the people that were highlighted as being leaders and close to God in those experiences, as well as distrust, suspicion. So grew up with a desire of wanting mystical experiences, but then feeling really guilty that I wanted them. So it was a conflicted relationship, to say the least. But I grew in my education and ended up going to seminary at Fuller Theological in Pasadena. And the way I tell my story sometimes, it was there that I took a class called Christian Spiritual Journey. And it was in that class that we studied the mystics. We studied the variety of esoteric experiences that a lot of the church fathers at the time had, that contributed to their strength and confidence and belief and contributed to the history of the Christian church. Um, it was in that class. We were pretty small. We were about 10 or 11 folks. But at one point, the question came up, has anyone else ever had mystical experiences? And I remember very clearly one woman raised her hand and talked about how she had received her call to ministry in a mystical experience that just happened to involve LSD. And it was confrontational to me at the time to think that somebody who was taking drugs the drug experience itself could lead it to a calling of ministry. But then, lo and behold, several other members of the class raised their hand and expressed that they too had received their call to ministry through a drug-induced experience. In fact, over half of the people in that class had expressed that they were pursuing leadership roles and religious roles and had their interest in the spiritual piqued by an experience brought upon by some type of substance. Uh, that sat with me for a little bit, and it wasn't until I learned about the study that was taking place that I raised my hand, signed up, and decided to jump in. I had been in chaplaincy and spiritual care at the time, so I had learned and developed some sense of awareness of my own biases, my own upbringing. Have learned to develop an appreciation for other faiths and beauties that come from a diverse range of viewpoints. And I came into the study with a sort of vulnerable intention of wanting to encounter God, wanting to experience something mystical, not knowing if that was a good desire at the time. I just knew that it was there. Um, and I had 2 sessions that were quite powerful. And I can say that as I reflect on the experiences, I did encounter God. But the way that I sometimes talk about the experience is that that wasn't the most profound thing that happened to me. The most profound thing that happened was that I met my son. Uh, when I was going through preparation and prior to having my first session, my wife and I discovered that we were pregnant with our firstborn son. And as you can imagine, as someone who's about to become a father, there was a little bit of apprehension, and I dealt with that apprehension by wanting to read every book. So I picked up a lot of books on parenthood. I wanted to, subscribe to a lot of Instagram parents about what would be good things to do as a parent, and I wanted to prepare. Uh, Behind that sentiment, I think there was a sense that I felt like I needed to change in order to be a good father to this child that was coming in, which isn't an uncommon experience, but I think for myself, there was an anxiety behind that that I wasn't fully aware of. And it leads me to what I still find to be particularly interesting about mystical experiences with psilocybin and other substances is that they just seem so tailored to the individual in ways that we may not always even be aware of, that lead me to a question of, is there some other force that's at work with these substances? Because in my very first session, I remember having the very profound experience that I was floating in this cavernous, dark expanse, and before me appeared a baby, a baby that appeared to be in utero. The skin was translucent. It was in the fetal position. I could see sort of its organs and warm lighting. But I had implicitly understood this baby to be my unborn child. And it was very large compared to myself. So I floated up and I was speaking to this child and saying, I'm doing everything I can to be ready for you. I want to change to be a good father. I want to make sure that I can be the best person I can be for you. And at that point, the baby had extended its arm and cradled me. And it was in that moment that I was confronted with an idea that I can only say came from outside of myself, because at the time, my theology didn't have room for this idea. But the idea was that this baby had selected me to be his father. And whatever anxiety I had been experiencing, whatever fears I had, just disappeared, melted away. The idea that out of the billions of people in this world, that this child was selecting me meant that I didn't need to change. I didn't need to be anyone different because I was the one that this baby wanted. That idea has stuck with me since the birth of our son. His name is Eli. He's now 7. And it's been far more supportive and complicated than I could have hoped for. When Eli was 3 years old, he was diagnosed with severe autism. And he is still in a place where he is not able to fully communicate, not fully able to experience us in ways that I think I would have hoped as a father. And there are days that I still encounter a lot of frustration and anger and maybe even fear at the idea that I was selected for this. But there's also a sense of hope that there was an agency involved on his part, and that on some level, that is beyond me right now. There is an interaction and an awareness. And it has informed my work as a spiritual care provider as well. I work in a pediatric context, and so I encounter families very frequently who are caught in stories that are very devastating, very traumatizing, having to face upheavals of their identity just from news of what their child may be experiencing. And so, how have I been able to integrate these experiences that have been supportive of relationship, connections to myself, connection to the divine, connection to the people around me? And I've been very active in the Canadian Association for Spiritual Care in uh, advocating for the need of prominent and competent spiritual care in psychedelic assisted psychotherapy environments. Uh, Psychedelic therapy in Canada is kind of on the move, and so far there's been a lot of focus on how to do this from a psychiatric context, from a physician context, without a whole lot of attention being paid to the spiritual dimension. But they're recognizing that psychotherapy in particular is really, really important. And I hope that people understand too that I've come to believe that the biggest change that occurs with these experiences doesn't occur because of the substance themselves, but occurs because of the community that's around them. If we look at indigenous communities that have been working with these medicines for centuries, we find that there is a communal process that goes along with it, and that a person's participation in the community is not distinct from their participation in these rituals with these medicines. And it's really important that there be places that folks can connect with others to seek support, to tell their story, to experience non-judgment, and to seek acceptance for the experiences that are going to come about because of these substances. So I like to think that the sessions themselves have a very core component of meaning for myself, but they also direct me to participate in my communities around me, to be someone that people can come and speak to, but also how can I contribute back to the people that I encounter and the relationships that I'm in. And it has oriented my intentions, much as Julie said, and in the metaphor she was using of seeing people through the eyes of God, and orienting myself to be the I thou, the relationship that we have with others. Every interaction uh, has the potential to be life-changing in that sense. And I don't say that to put pressure on people for these interactions. We all know that there are tougher days, but there is a place to come to rest that I have found that has surprised me, that has come about from some of these experiences that I had. Um, I can honestly say I haven't done any of these substances since the study. There are days that I'm curious about doing them again, but I do want to proceed in a way that, reflects awareness for myself and awareness for the communities around me, that we're all on our journey. And for some, our journey includes mystical experiences that have elicited by substances or not. Others have a different story, and it's just as valuable. It's just as important for us to hear. And so I want to say thank you, I guess. I want to present gratitude for being able to share my story with you. And I appreciate the time to be here and look forward to hearing any questions that come up later on. How's my time? I didn't even check my time.
Thank you, Jeff. I mean, yeah, thank you, Jeff. Golly, I think we've talked about that. You and I've talked about this. I've heard that story before that with your son, and my son's 27 now. But I had that same anxiety, and this was way before I was in the study. And I read James Hillman's book, The Soul's Code. He's a Jungian analyst, and in that book, he talks about that his understanding or his theory is that just what you said, that children are called to the parents they have, and that brought me an incredible, and that was before my son was born too. It brought me an incredible amount of peace, because that anxiety, about, oh God, I'm gonna screw this up. I can't.
It's a big deal, right?
I can't even hardly get myself to work on time. So and I was way too old. I was 35, but it was a huge relief. And I think, again, that's an example of how these insights can transcend.
Yeah.
He was not writing from a Christian perspective at all. He was writing as a therapist and a Jungian, and somebody that really was.
So much of my spiritual context, the focus is on the afterlife, that there was never any attention paid to pre-life. and like that's a playful, creative dimension too that can be really helpful to people.
Oh gosh, yes. Yeah. So yeah, thank you, Jeff. That's just a very powerful story. And
thank you.
What you're doing, and the fact that you're working at children's, I mean, you can look back and see all the threads coming together. So so thank you. And Ruben, to finish up our little trinity of religious leaders, with all of us with our own different stories, you've got your own unique perspective. And from what I know about your own journey, is that, unlike Jeff, in your tradition, the tradition you came up in, experiences of God were expected, right? I mean, so I don't want to step on your story, but I just see Christian religions are all complicated. Christianity is very complicated. There's multiple Christianities, and yours is unique. I mean, we all have a unique story. So I'm really interested to hear your reflection. So thank you for being here, Ruben.
Yeah, for context for everybody, I came from the Pentecostal tradition into the study. And before I jump in, I just want to give a huge shout out to Rabbi Zach Kamenetz, a dear friend. Appreciate the work that he is doing, and everybody at Shefa. So thank you for letting me share a little bit of my journey. And again, before I jump in, it's kind of interesting. I've mentioned this to Hunt and a few of the other participants who we still stay in contact with. My journey started on May 4th with my first session at NYU. And it wasn't probably until 2022 or 2022, 4 years after that experience, I did both sessions in 2018, that I was able to process with anybody. So just the fact that you guys are creating space for folks to integrate within their tradition and give language, as Rabbi Julie did so beautifully, to those experiences was powerful. And thank you, Jeff, as well for sharing. Love hearing your story, and love hearing the work that you're doing up there in Canada. Yeah, so I will try to give as much information. I am still this is probably maybe only the first or second time in any kind of public way that I've been able to share my journey with participating in the religious professional studies. Came from the Pentecostal tradition. So if you're familiar with Christianity, there's a spectrum, as there is in many other traditions. Pentecostals are probably the furthest away from doing anything with psychedelics, much less alcohol, cigars, cigarettes. It's very, very rigid and very very restrictive in terms of indulging in any way. But the Pentecostal tradition is deeply, deeply, deeply rooted in the mystic experience. So and I'll use some language that is very Christian, very Pentecostal as I share my story. So feel free to ask questions in the chat. I didn't grow up in any strong faith tradition. I grew up a heathen, grew up very much outside of a very strong religious context. And I got born again. I was born again. That was a term that was very strong and is very dear still to me now. And the idea of born again is that come to Jesus moment. It's the radical transformation. So I had a very radical transformation from living a world before my religious conversion that was rooted in any kind of tradition. And I got born again into this Pentecostal, very, very tongue-talking, prophecy, very active gifts, healings, miracles, revivals, big tents, music, screaming, shouting, dancing, all this, what therapists or psychotherapists might call somatic ways of worshiping are valued. They're integrated, and they're done so in a very, very rooted way. It's not it's happens in an organic spiritual way through the active work of the Holy Spirit as the Pentecostal lens would interpret it. And so just finding my way into the study was kind of wild. I think I was the only person that was from a non-mainline Christian tradition in the study. And what really led me to moving into this exploration through sacred medicine and through plant medicine was it was right in the middle it was right in the middle of kind of 2016, 2015. There was a huge shift in the American Christian landscape that was jarring. It really opened me to do some deep, deep, deep exploration. My wife and I had worked overseas doing humanitarian work in a missionary context, worked with Doctors Without Borders and with doing construction work in under-resourced communities across the country. We were in Africa, France. We were in the Amazon basin for some time working with faith-rooted humanitarian organizations. But when something started to shift and I started to go through what a lot of people are calling today is deconstruction, which is, some people see that as a good thing, bad thing. When I started going through my deconstruction, there was just so much religious anger and religious rage at what was happening and what was happening in the name of Christianity, what was happening in the name of the church, what was happening in the name of what have you. And it created this tremendous dissonance in me. And I found myself actively as a pastor, actively as a community worker. I also do social work, bivocational. So I've worked in various social service settings and seeing the trauma in my neighborhood, seeing the trauma in my community, and seeing the complicity, what I saw at the time, the complicity of my own tradition and my own community, faith community, it created this deep desire to not only decolonize and deconstruct, but I wanted to make the pivot from what I was against to what I'm for. And it started this journey for me of reclaiming my indigeneity, reclaiming this indigenous roots. And obviously, shout out to Maria Sabina, who was the godmother of introducing so many folks in the West and the global North to these sacred plant medicines. And so off I went. I got a chance to get it to participate in the New York City study. I was in Southern California at the time. Long story. My wife and I, we had 5 children, so we ended up on the other side of the country. And it was a radical, radical reset moment. And just kind of as a sidebar, it's been super fascinating to see just the evolution of the conversation from 2014 and 2015 when I first read about the study. I think it was 2015. The Christian Century did an ad that while I was at Fuller Seminary, I came across as well. I applied. But as I started to kind of again, this is super Christianese. I had a prayer group, right? My intercession partners. I started, hey, I'm going to do this. Keep me in prayer. Everyone was like, what is going on, man? This the stuff that's going on in the world is getting to you, really? Like, I'm like, no, there's something deeper. I'm being called to it, There was an agency there, like you mentioned, Jeff. There's something. The spirit, like you mentioned, Julie, was calling me to go from the backside to the front side of the glory of God, and the psychedelics and the 2 sessions that I experienced absolutely were that radical reset. And you know, to hear the conversation go from 2015 to where it is now, 26, and the hush hush you can't say this. I mean, it's just so taboo for a pastor, for a rabbi, for an imam, whatever your faith background is, to now where it is. Now we're just to see that in like 8 to 10 years, it's wild, it's encouraging, it's terrifying, it's all the feels. But I will add my little 2 cents and say, I've seen the kind of there was the train has left the station and we were just jazzed. Like this is going to revolutionize seminaries and churches that are dead and da da da. And then there was the pushback. Wait a minute, pump the brakes. There's some ethical things, and rightfully so. All this, there was this like sense of hold on, let's put harm reduction. Let's start informing, which is very positive. I just want to throw my 2 cents into the super excited pile again. It was radical. It reset. It was mountaintop for me, both sessions. So it wasn't until four years later when I got a chance to process with some of the other RPS, religious professional studies folks, that I got to hear about people who went into the exact same study, set and setting, but had less than positive experiences. That was groundbreaking for me. And yeah, so it's been a really, really beautiful journey. The two experiences themselves were uh, transformative. I would even use the term born again. They were born again moments for me. I describe my first born again moment of being born again from being the life of a heathen to a follower of Christ. And my second born again moment was uh, being born again from a religious a-hole to to seeing the world a little bit more expansively, seeing the divine in all the faces that we mentioned. And ironically, I took for my first session, it was about an 8-hour session. You take the medicine. I took it around 10 o'clock. First hour you go in and they're giving you the orientation day before we did our walkthrough. So the medicine lasts between eight hours or so. So I was on the train, the 6 train back to my home in the afterglows, and there's nothing more amazing than being on the 6 train uh, in the middle of the summer, just crammed around and still having the afterglow. That is a very memorable moment. So yeah, I would say the biggest takeaway for me in both of those experiences was it it wasn't just about the experience. It wasn't just about having those mountaintop moments. It really was the start of going back to that moment over and over again as I experience highs and lows. And it's almost like I have a touchstone that I can go back to. I can play the playlist again and I can go back. I can remember what I was writing, how I was thinking about God and myself and my community and my call. And I can go back to that. Even all these years later, I can still remember that. Integrating it, actually putting that into practices, into rhythms. I'm still working on that. I'm still on that journey, but it's still, I can still feel it. I can still touch it. I can still go back to it. That's powerful. That's meaningful. And it did my experiences, both sessions, uh, like Jeff mentioned, they greatly reaffirmed my sense of call, my vocation, my sense of wanting to serve God and serve my community. It also made it much, much more expansive. I currently serving at a church in East Harlem, which is a UCC church, United Church of Christ. Very, again, opposite side of the spectrum. I went into the study as an ordained Pentecostal pastor serving in Los Angeles, and came out the other end, a UCC pastor in East Harlem. So big, big swing, big transformation. But just the through line was, this was a gift that God was giving, the Spirit was giving, to see the world in a way, to see myself, to see my family, to get a glimpse. And then you got to go back into the matrix. That was beautiful. Just the fact that I was able to get that experience, see it, feel it, revel in it, experience the reality of it, and still go back to it, was very transformative. So that's a bit of my story.
Gosh, Ruben, thank you. God, so much pops into my head as I'm listening to you, and I don't think I knew that you'd seen that ad in Christian Century. That's where I first saw it too, and I think we were only a couple people that ended up being in the study. But I remember thinking, this is literally what I thought is like somebody Johns Hopkins gives a damn what clergy think about something. I'm in. I just felt like such an important intersection of science and medicine and religion and spirituality that was my real draw. But the Christian Century article was the first place I saw that, and I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for that article in Christian Century. So, which, if you don't know, that's sort of a moderate liberal Protestant magazine that used to come out every 2 weeks, and it was an ad and a story that was in there too in the issue I saw. And also just thinking about your own Pentecostal background, there was a question in the chat that I didn't answer about is Pentecostalism and Baptist the same thing? I wrote, oh no, not at all. In terms of kind of understanding Scripture and experience, very different in the realm of Christianity. But for me, again, I'm not going to say much about it because it's other places. But I'm Episcopalian, and in the spectrum of Christianity, we're sort of in the middle of things on some ways, but we sort of keep the Holy Spirit at a respectful distance. And I think institutional mainline Christianity does that. I think because because the Spirit is very unpredictable. The Spirit blows where she wishes, and it can lead to, it's not losing control. It's giving the control to the divine. And we're not really, most humans are not very good at that. So it's been a chance for me to revisit and learn from the Pentecostal tradition, which I've always had great respect for. It just felt kind of foreign to my experience, and my experience of the study was this very embodied experience of the Holy Spirit. So like you would see at a big Pentecostal revival. So
and not to over characterize or paint super broad with one brush. Pentecostal Christianity tends to be less academic than other expressions of Christianity. It is the fastest growing expression of Christianity in the world, and it is expanding primarily in the global South, African, Asian, Latin America. It is, and one of the big reasons that I would say I still hold very dearly that those Pentecostal roots is Pentecostalism is rooted in experience. It's a form of faith that is very embodied. It's an embodied faith, and I would even go so far as to call it's a expression of Christianity that's very trauma informed. And so psychedelics is, obviously the data is there that of how transformative and how catalytic the medicine can be in terms of helping people with PTSD, people who have experienced trauma. And so, it's ironic that Pentecostalism that was one of the things that drew me again to want to participate, was to say, I don't know if very many Pentecostals are going to sign up to this study. So I'd love to add my perspective into the chorus of voices that are going to contribute to this study.
Thank God you did. And one more thing, just about your talk. There's no way that you were ever a religious a-hole. So I'm going to push back on that. But
no, so again, I'll give you an example of what I don't think I was either. But my first ever sermon, I was 14 years old. I had just gotten saved, and it was street preaching, bullhorn style in South Central Los Angeles. That's the experiences. You get saved and you're just set out, you are empowered, you're moving forward, you're in it, and it's very, very it's powerful. It's a beautiful thing. And I do think that there are expressions of Judaism, Christianity, Islam that have these voices that have constantly been drawing us towards the mystic and probably away from the religious certainty that gives so much comfort to people, like you said. But when the Spirit's moving, she shakes everything up, and that was beautiful. I think that the medicine is a very I do believe that there is space for believers, for people of within their tradition to have these experiences integrated into their tradition.
Yes, I agree. So I'm going to spend maybe, I don't know, not too long, just a little bit of discussion amongst the four of us. Then I want to turn it over to the chat and to questions that Chloe will help. Between Chloe and I, we'll sort of sort through that. We talked about a couple of things beforehand, but as we've been talking, something popped into my head that I'm going to throw out. It's not a big curveball because it's things we've talked about. But one of the insights that came out of the study that I read about or maybe heard the researchers say is that one of the things consistent across all of us was we had after those experiences, we had a deeper appreciation of our own ministry. For those of, I think we're probably all aware, but there's a high burnout factor in religious leadership, just like in any profession. And I think that's gotten more difficult or more profound as time has moved on, that the difficulty of keeping institutions going and the results are, we don't ever often even see the results of our work, and we're criticized a lot. And it's not an easy vocation for any of us. And so the appreciation of our own work and ministry, the appreciation of our own tradition and the depth of it, like I had with this connection to Pentecostalism after that. And then an appreciation, a broadening of our appreciation of other traditions that Julie certainly alluded to. So I'm just wondering, from the three of us, and I'll start with Jeff on this, just of your own ministry, your own tradition, and then the tradition of the other traditions, and what comes up for you in that framework.
No, thank you. I at first blush, I experience the first part of that question. I'm probably a non-traditional religious leader in the fact that I don't have a parish. I don't speak on Sundays or Saturdays or anything like that. But I do. It has given me additional tools in my line of work. My line of work requires a lot of self-awareness, a lot of ability to sit in the midst of suffering, a lot of ability to be comfortable in distress and in trauma, and it's given me greater capacity to encounter that. I think prior to the study, there were a lot of experiences of death that would impact me very, very deeply, and they still do. But I find I'm able to respond to death and have a little more emotional reservoir in those spaces, from some examples that I experienced in the study. I think that's partly due because the other thing that I find as different is like it's given me a lot of personal spiritual resources to draw from and to seek meaning and power. And there was some very vivid imagery, very rich imagery in both of my sessions. I have several art pieces even in my office space that I got commissioned that serve to remind me of the richness of those experiences, that I can still, like Ruben was saying, dip into that space. And that is an edifying and fulfilling space to dip into, where I didn't have much of those experiences prior to these sessions. One of the most powerful images that I have was from Egyptian iconography, which I'm like, I didn't study Egypt. I have no affinity for Egyptian, but like it was just a powerful image, and so that has come into how I seek to. I mean, self-care is really important in my line of work, so this is one of the processes that I have for that, and it has given me newer perspective, broaden my horizons, broaden the beauty that I recognized out there, which is directly impactful of the people that I care for.
Oh, beautiful, Jeff. Ruben, thank you. What about Ruben? What about you? You're muted, Ruben.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
So just this sense of I think across all of us in the study, there was some sense of our appreciation of our own ministry and work, the burnout thing, our own traditions, and then the other traditions, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, coming out of that experience.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's probably the word that would summarize it: expansive. I think that part of it is, looking back, I imagine that everybody that was drawn to this study from the religious studies religious professionals were already on that track. That was at least my case. I was already kind of moving away from a rigid understanding of my tradition, and then this just absolutely gave you access to a deeper form of reality. And then, my own tradition helped me to create language for it. And I think that was part of it. Is one of the summaries that I came away with was, understanding how each of our traditions are like different languages, and we're speaking about the same thing, but it was it. And so I kind of thought, man, this is just really, it was powerful in helping to appreciate the people who are out there who are bilingual and trilingual, and yeah, so that was a big part for me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Good. Julie, and again, this idea for this question really came out of something you'd written me yesterday, I think. But and as the only Jewish person in this group, I'd be especially interested about
panel,
on this panel. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, you really asked more than one question.
I know I did.
I'll say a little bit about it. As far as my own rabbinate, I would say, I can't say like, oh, everything was just rosy after that. And some people say like, oh, I had no more anxiety. I actually had kind of a tough time at the congregation I was at then. And it was also 2016. I'll just leave it there. But I actually have felt over time that it definitely opened my heart and compassion a lot more as I'm doing pastoral care, which is a huge part of what I do. I am a congregational rabbi with a congregation with several hundred people in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. But at that time I was in New York, Westchester County, New York. And I also, sorry, I wrote something down and then I can't read what I wrote. Deployment. Yeah. My teacher, Reb Zalman, would talk about you get deployed like you could say by Ruach HaKodesh, by the Holy Spirit, by God. This force is deploying you where you need to be if you're open to it. And I think since then, I've just had this sense of, I used to kind of have all these, everything's a plan. And actually, I realized I'm just being sent all these places that I never even heard of, including my current job, which has turned out to be really wonderful. So that, I think in that way it affected me. And I think it deepened my faith. Now, my faith, not in the sense of belief, but in the, that despite everything that the world, somehow we're going to create a better world together, right? That we, despite all the things that are happening, which are very real. And the Jewish word for faith, emunah, it's not so much about belief or precepts, it's about faithfulness. It's about trust, I guess. So I feel that. Also, the photography that I talked about, I do use that in my rabbinate. And also I do a lot of nature things. I started doing more and more, even in New York and here in Delaware. I call them soul strolls, nature walks, nature. On our high holidays, we meet at a church, a Methodist church, because we need more space. And they have screens, and we have scenes like nature scenes from the beach that I took that are there during different prayers, or I use them for pastoral care needs, etc. As far as the interfaith piece, that was really, really profound to me because I had already been very involved in interfaith work. I had started a Palestinian Jewish dialogue during the Second Intifada with a Palestinian imam in San Antonio. Out in Chico, California, I helped start a tri-faith group of the Abrahamic faiths, and I just kept being involved with that. But when I was in those sessions, it was a whole different level. First of all, I had so many experiences of other religions, and when it came to looking at one that I wrote about, was that I felt I entered the temple in Jerusalem and I sense it that really is the house of prayer for all peoples, as it says in the Bible. And then I am, going into the Holy of Holies. I'm becoming the temple. This was, as I was taking the psilocybin. And another time I'm chanting the Aleinu, which is this prayer we have at the end, which is of each service, which is about perfecting the world. But it's a little triumphalist. Part of it is like, we've got the right way. You're all going to see the truth in the end. And it's not that blunt, but it's it's got some of that. And there I was chanting that along with Hindus. They were chanting. Maybe it was the music that was playing, but they're singing their song, I'm saying it, and it's something we're doing together. And then I chant Shalom, and I hear them chanting Om, and we're all together. When it came to things about Christianity, I had some difficulty because I was experiencing all these Christian visions, and I thought, how can I do this? This is people who were, the visions were places of people that were persecuting my people. I'll just, in centuries past and so on, and I won't get totally into that, but I kind of worked through that. And lastly, I said that after many years of interfaith work, I experienced an existential connection to every world religion, and we are all seeking the one, and facet of the truth is the only truth. I realized I could learn from every religion, and I wrote right after the second session that I have so much to learn from the Buddhist insight into mindfulness and the illusory nature of the self, the Hindu grasp of multifaceted reality and causation, the Muslim devotion to the one, indigenous religions' reverence for the earth, the humanist search for the knowledge and human responsibility, and the Christian message. So I got a different view of Christianity, the Christian message that the divine can walk among us and teach a path of radical love. And then my Aleinu prayer became a universal prayer, acknowledging the value of each religion. I can worship with all. They're all what my teacher Reb Zalman called the vital organs of the planet. And then what about my own faith, Judaism, because you asked about that. Yeah. I really felt this strong feeling that what I'm here to do in Judaism, the big I and I, the little I, is to share with the world that every life is precious, holy, and stamped with a divine image, to love the stranger, which is our most repeated commandment, that meaning the foreigner. That's what it meant, according to our commentator Rashi. And because you were once in their place. And tikkun olam, making this world or our corner of it a better place for all the creatures and all humanity, all of whom bear this divine image. And of course, I want to say, to paraphrase Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, that doesn't mean we're perfect at doing this. Sometimes we are the messengers who forgot the message. Sometimes I'm very disappointed in how we're fulfilling it. But I think it's still alive. This, like every religion, doesn't always live up to what it's ought, as my teacher would say. Sometimes there's the is and there's the ought, but we can still strive for that, what we could be together.
Oh my God, Julie. Thank you. God, it's so beautiful. Golly, thank you. God, there were so many thoughts that came into my head as all three of you were talking, and now I'm sort of losing it, but losing my train of thought on that. But yeah, beautiful. I mean, I'll go back, and that was all so. And I feel like right now, if we could help people, all of us on the call, not just the four of us, but help other people, whatever tradition we come from, to know that we can learn from each other. I don't have to become a Muslim or a Jew to learn from, and I should be a better Christian, but that does not diminish anything that's happening in these other traditions at their best, or at what they aspire to be and what they're intended to be. So I was trying to keep an eye on the chat. Let's see. I do want to give a shout out to my friend Clint Kyles, who's on the call. He was out talking about this before I was. He has a podcast called the Christian Psychedelic Podcast. He lives in Texarkana, not exactly the center of psychedelic Christianity, but there he is, and he's doing amazing work on his podcast and being a witness to this in his own place and with all the people he's talked to. So just know in the Jewish tradition, in Judaism, there's lots of people now talking about psychedelics. They had trouble finding rabbis to be in the study. So, and then it's an emerging conversation in Islam too. So it's happening.
They did have trouble finding rabbis. They had trouble finding rabbis who are naive to psychedelics, at least in my own group. But I think it's not only Jewish renewal. It's not. Yeah, that doesn't mean I was giving a sermon on it. I still haven't done that, but I have felt a lot more free about sharing about it.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's right. Okay, let's see this question. I'm just going to, since your experiences with the study, have you been able to connect with congregants about this is a great question. Have you been able to connect with congregants about their plant medicine experiences? If so, or in your case, Jeff, and the people you're working with? If so, what's that been like? And let me, maybe Jeff, maybe since you're in a non-traditional setting, start with you. If you,
Yeah,
yeah,
sure. I think what I've noted in my context, I'd say maybe 5 or 6 years ago was the first time that we had a presentation on psychedelics and spirituality at our annual conference for spiritual care practitioners. And it was done over a lunch. And my understanding is the response was kind of like, oh, this is kind of woo-woo, whatever. The next year, we had a more fulsome workshop on psychedelics and spiritual care where people expressed hesitation, people expressed reservations that we would be encouraging drug use, and all the stuff that I think went along with stigma around psychedelic substances. The next year, we did another workshop, and the conversation turned to one that was more acceptance, but now concern was about the ethics, the safety around medical environments taking on psychedelic therapies. And so, like Ruben was saying, it's been really fascinating to see the change in culture. And even more recently, when we've been doing that, we've had more spiritual care practitioners coming out and sharing their experiences of substances, both negative and positive from their own contexts, and how that has sort of contributed to their own biases that they have, but people are feeling more open. Even when we talk about people in religious leaders and congregation setups, we're trying to inform people that there are people in your midst that have done these substances and have had these experiences and want to talk to you about them. So I would love to see more popcorn integration groups and spaces that people can feel safe to come together and have conversations about what this means to them, because that's I think where in particular spiritual care providers can contribute in the same way that we do bereavement support in hospitals and stuff. I think we can do psychedelic care support when you're seeing this come to be a part more of the medical establishment.
right. And even I would hope even in congregations like AA, like
Yeah.
just people coming together, not to necessarily do psychedelics, but to share their experiences. That's good. Ruben, and now Julia will finish with you. But Ruben, so you've been in Los Angeles and in New York, and I'm wondering,
Yeah,
you had conversation,
the congregations that I've had the privilege of serving, and I've been a local pastor for over 25 years now. And so all throughout that, very, very few people in my Christian tradition would have been exposed to that or feel comfortable with it. But I have found that the folks that I have shared with have been very open. And I do think that having a minister or a spiritual leader who is willing to talk with this, I do think it helps to pique curiosity. So we've had a couple of congregants that we've kind of helped guide through their own explorations as well. That was very, very meaningful. That was very beautiful. So it's been interesting to even share my experience with congregants and have them going from deep concern to curiosity to, hey, I think I might need something like that, because again, I'm not trying to proselytize or convince people that they should do this, but me just naturally sharing about my positive experience and how transformative it was for me and how it did affirm my call, my call to follow in my vocational ordination and commitment. So I do think that for some people, having a spiritual leader in their congregation or a spiritual advisor, it does make a difference.
Yeah, exactly. And Julie, is the tradition that's most open, even though not every Jewish person is open to psychedelics, but it's a more open conversation. Yeah. What about for you in your
Although,
own?
when I was in the study in 2016, I still felt reticent to make it public, but I did tell the president of my synagogue that I was going to be in the study. And I was close to the person who worked as the administrator, so I totally shared my experiences with her. The president, I just told her I was going to be in it. I didn't think she would appreciate the experiences. But my current synagogue, I totally talked to the presidents of the synagogue, and I've talked to other people, but I haven't really given a sermon, like I said, or something. And maybe I do want to be more public. Like I'm putting more, well, you know what? I have put some things like on my Substack, and I've shared it on Facebook. I've made it more public now that the study came out, because they told us to kind of let the study come out before we talked about our personal experiences. And I hope to put it in a memoir, God willing, or some kind of book. But in general, I do think it's influenced me, because I have been more, I've been more likely to ask Jewish people, to talk about their spiritual experiences or their experiences of God, which to Jewish people is not something we do a whole lot. It's like we're talking about often. I don't know what the other rabbis think. I mean, Jewish renewal rabbis do, but a lot of times it's about the Jewish people and the culture and the history and doing good deeds and all that. But so what I found is so many people have had deep spiritual experiences, but they don't have the opportunity to share them. They're not necessarily with psychedelics. Sometimes they were spontaneous. I've also found it, well, I had somebody who was very ill with a terminal illness who I asked if they wanted to be. I told her I'd been in the study. Would they like to be in a study because I know that sometimes having psilocybin has been helpful to people facing some life-threatening condition. That person didn't want to do it, but they weren't upset that I suggested it, but I would be open to suggesting that again. And recently, when I was comforting someone, a mourner who had a sudden very terrible loss of a spouse, I did bring in again the experience, the different attitude that I had towards our soul and its survival in the bigger soul. Like, it's not that I know exactly how it happens, but this sense that there's something indestructible in us that's that's already there. It's not just confined to us. And I was able to talk to them. I think it was helpful, and they absolutely didn't balk about the psychedelic part. Also recently I was at my rabbinic conference, and someone asked me how could they do this too, and I said, refer them to Shefa. So I think, I'm starting to share more about it, and I hope I will more, but I haven't specifically asked my congregants, did you take LSD back in college in the 70s? Yeah. But things are opening up more, just like everybody said.
And
definitely.
I think there is such value in people feeling comfortable enough to, whatever the topic, but with psychedelics, to know that there's somebody in their congregation in a leadership position who's open to, without judgment and acceptance and curiosity, to know about their experiences. That, I think if Ligare or any of us accomplish that, to have people willing to go to their spiritual leader, spiritual care provider, and be honest about these things, whether it's positive or negative, and just to share that, could be a huge step forward. And I think that's one of the things the religious communities can bring is a support. People need preparation, and afterwards they need ways to make meaning and make sense of these experiences. And I think that's the religion at its best, helps people do that. So, well, may
I say something also, just to make sense of this spiritual experience, especially for Jews. Again, it could be more, I think that's a good way for me to go about it anyways, just to ask people to talk in general. Have you had unexplained experiences? And it's okay if we were taking a psychedelic, or it happened. Because I also recently had someone who told me they were having many spiritual moments, and after a loved one died, and that another rabbi kind of said, oh, no, we don't believe that stuff. And I was really appalled and said, no, actually, we have a lot of that in our tradition. And, I've experienced things like that. And so, wow, I think, for the more mainstream Jewish communities, we still need to open up a lot more to the spiritual dimensions of life.
Yeah. Same. I think same in more buttoned down Christian communities, where people are just Episcopalians are very reticent to talk about their experiences of God. So I agree completely. I wanted to, Wendy, my friend and colleague in Oregon, put a link into a program that's in Oregon that provides legal access to religious leaders. Have been Christian groups and Jewish groups. It's the Sherry Eckert Foundation that Wendy just put the link in the chat. So if you're a religious leader, that's broad. That's not just ordained people. It's a broad understanding of that. Take a look at that website that Wendy posted the links in the chat, and feel free to apply for that. It's an amazing opportunity to have a experience with psychedelics in a small group setting in the context of your own religious tradition, especially Christians and Jews. I mean, Christians and Jews right now, but I'm sure that'll expand. So thank you, Wendy, for posting that. Well, I think I really don't, I want to be sensitive to the time. I want to thank my friends on the panel and for your willingness to be here, but also to share these really personal and profoundly personal and powerful experiences. And of course, to Chloe from Shefa for her work and getting us, corralling us and organizing us and getting us focused and to get us here and support us in the back. And to Shefa and to Rouhani and to Ligare for being places where people can come for in their own traditions. So we'll send out more resources in the email, and including links to Julie's photography and her Substack, and the other, I'll pull all that together and get that to Chloe for tomorrow. So thank all of you for being here. Yeah. And
thank you, Chloe, and thank you, Hunt, for making us so at ease. And I'm really so grateful to Zach for founding this organization and for the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I agree. Yes. Yeah.
And for my colleagues, Jeff and Ruben, I call everybody in our group, I call my psychedelic siblings. I'm so glad to be part of this family. It's much more meaningful than just the individual experience. Yeah.
Oh God, yes. Yeah,
thank you.
Right. Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here.
Good to see you guys. Thank you guys for letting me share.
Bye. Yeah. Thank you.
Bye.